Man, just when the show is starting to get good, they go and do this. We're going to get into it, but first let's start off with a quick recap of episode 4 of Skeleton Crew. Jod and the kids arrive at the coordinates provided by Kim, suspected to be the location of At-Aten. Now the planet looks like At-Aten, but it's more of a post-apocalyptic version of it with all the same architecture that's been completely destroyed. The kids go investigate and SM-33 and Jod stay back in the ship. Now they quickly realize that this must be one of those planets that Kim had told them about, basically one of these treasure planets similar to At-Aten that had basically been destroyed. So this one is actually called Ad-Akron. Meanwhile, back on the ship, SM-33 is malfunctioning, and in a brief moment his memory kind of comes back to him, and he says that he has been to Ad-Akron before. In fact, he even remembers Ad-Aten just for a few moments, but Jod is not able to get much out of him, and they end up getting captured then. Now while the kids are out walking around, they get ambushed by a girl who's about their age who is dressed as a warrior, and she quickly hides them as the opposing army of her clan are passing by. The girl soldier takes Wim, Neil, Fern, and KB back to her base, where they find a clan of freedom fighters made up mostly of children and led by this girl's father. The kids tell the clan leader that they're just trying to get home, and he tells them that there's this fallen sanctum that basically has these markings, these carvings in the wall of coordinates for other planets, and he thinks it could possibly contain the coordinates for Ad-Aten. But then he also says that they could prove useful to him, and they basically need to prove themselves before he's willing to take them to this sanctum. So Fern, KB, and Wim basically practice firing pistols, and the soldier girl and Neil, they go off on their own. Soldier girl tells Neil that the enemy basically stole their Neope, which is actually the creature that we saw back in episode 1, The Phantom Menace, back on Tatooine. But Neil just cannot fathom how this planet can be ravaged by war while his planet is completely peaceful. But after what seems like maybe like an hour of target practice, the clan leader tells the kids that they're going to be leading them into battle, and they reluctantly obey at risk of being shot by them. But instead of encountering the enemy army, it's actually Jod and SM-33. It turns out they made some sort of deal with the enemy, trading Wim's Republic credits for their lives. At this point, it's determined that the children's bravery makes them worthy to be led to this fallen sanctum. Inside, they do find the engraved coordinates of all of these different treasure planets, but the one for Ad-Aten is missing its coordinates. It's actually been destroyed. SM-33's memory then kicks in, and he recalls that he's actually been here before. In fact, he's the one who destroyed it. Fern realizes that he must have been instructed by his former captain to not only destroy it, but also to forget everything he knew about Ad-Aten. As the new captain, she overrides his commands, and he actually does begin to remember Ad-Aten. But this also triggers a failsafe where he's supposed to basically destroy anyone who's trying to find out about the planet. So he starts attacking them, and Jod is trying to get his blaster to work, and meanwhile Neil distracts the droid, and Jod is given enough time to hit the off switch on the droid. And that was the end of the episode. Now guys, after last week's episode, I was really looking forward to this week, but man, I really disliked this episode. I do think it had a pretty strong start and a strong ending, but 90% of this episode felt like a complete waste of time to me. In fact, I couldn't help but think that I was watching the Canto Bight scene from The Last Jedi all over again. Now here's the thing, I'm not expecting every part of every episode to be something that moves the plot forward. I do recognize that there are some episodes that are all about character development, and I think that that's sort of what they are going for this episode, but I don't think it worked. Now, in one sense, I think this episode felt a little bit rushed. I feel like they could have given it a little bit more time to breathe as we're just being introduced to this brand new planet with this struggle that's going on. It kind of felt like a big deal that this planet compared to their home planet was completely at war, and I kind of wanted to understand a little bit better what was going on there, but they kind of just breezed over it in my opinion. But again, the whole struggle of this episode, which is trying to get to this fallen sanctum, it feels very contrived. Like, why does the leader of this clan make them train to become soldiers? And why are they only given what seems like an hour to do it? And then they're thrust out in the middle of the battle, like they have to lead it and go first. Like, why is that? And honestly, when he told the kids, hey, you're going to have to prove yourself, I would have been like, no, we're good. Just point us in the right direction and we're going to go get our pirate friend and a droid and we'll go and find it ourselves. So that whole premise honestly really bugged me. Not to mention there was also some just really bad dialogue. So basically when they walk into the camp, you can see that a lot of these soldiers, the people that are kind of pushing them around, are children. It's pretty obvious that this is a different situation. They almost have like a sort of a Peter Pan, Lost Boys sort of thing going on here. But for some reason, the leader still has to tell them, on this world, we treat our children like adults. Isn't that already obvious? They're basically breaking the #1 rule in storytelling of telling and not showing. I mean, they've already shown us. Why do they have to tell us as well? But that was not the only terrible line in this episode. There's a part later on where Neil is saying goodbye to Soldier Girl, whatever her name is. And Neil basically says, I don't know what to say. And Soldier Girl replies, for once, say nothing. And not only is this a corny line, but why did they even say this? Like, has Neil been like this talkative character this entire time to where this even makes any sense? I just don't get it. Now guys, if you're enjoying my review and breakdown of Skeleton Crew so far, would you do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe below? But I will say that the biggest thing that bugged me about this episode was actually this dynamic between Neil and Soldier Girl, whatever her name is. You know, Soldier Girl basically explains to Neil, you know, they've been at war this whole time. They've been struggling. They have to ration out food. And all he can say is, well, I don't get it. Back at home, we don't ever fight. Fighting is bad. Yes, he actually says those words. And in fact, later in the episode when they're on their battlefield and he's scared out of his wits, he has the nerve to say the brave thing to do would be just to make peace with everyone and be kind. Now, I think rightly, Soldier Girl calls him out as being from a weak clan, and that's obviously the case. He literally says that the only fight he's ever been in was with one of his siblings. And that's fine to some degree. You would expect him to be trying to process this dichotomy here, and he's going to be naive, he's a child. But what bothers me is that later on, it's almost like the Soldier Girl comes to the conclusion, like, yes, you are weak, but it actually makes you kind. And, you know, that's kind of what we're missing around here. And I just don't get that. What is the message here? Is it really realistic to expect everyone just to stop fighting and just be kind to each other all of a sudden? Yeah, maybe in a perfect world, but nations don't go to war against each other just for the heck of it. It's always a lot more complicated than that. And what's worse is we're hearing this from a naive little kid who's grown up on a cushy planet with literally nothing to worry about in his life. And that's why I can't help but compare this episode to Canto Bight. It almost seems like they're trying to make some sort of moral point here, but it's one that's kind of tone deaf and one that's not really that relatable. And to top it off, ironically, it ends up with them rescuing a bunch of animals. And I'm not gonna lie, it really felt like a cop-out too, where Jod just kind of shows up towards the end of that conflict and resolves everything. You don't really even see what happens, it all happens off screen. So honestly, I hated all of that. But once we finally got beyond that into this fallen sanctum, I felt like we were actually finally getting somewhere. Despite everything I've said, I actually think the overall plot points of this episode are actually quite good, but unfortunately they only make up about 10 of the 30 minutes of this runtime. You know, if you look at it, it's supposed to be like a 45 minute episode, but the credits start right at the 30-minute mark, so a lot of time is wasted. But the main plot points of them visiting this ravaged treasure planet that's kind of a parallel to their own, that actually might contain a clue to where their planet is, and the fact that the droid had actually been here before and that his captain was trying to hide his trail to the treasure, I think that all is actually really good. I think the only criticism I have of the last little scene there is when Fern kind of gets a little emotional. She kind of freaks out when they find out that the coordinates to their home planet have been destroyed. That moment I felt like could have been good, but they didn't really build up to it. It didn't really feel earned. And that's what I kind of want to go back to. Again, I recognize that episodes like this, where it's a little bit more character development driven, I think are necessary. I think that's what they were going for with them being, you know, sort of captured by this this war group and kind of made to fight in this battle. I get that that's what that was for, but it really just did not accomplish that. In fact, they probably shouldn't have focused on Neil the whole time. If you think about it, for most of the episode, it's almost like they focus on his character, but really, I think they should have focused on Fern, because I think they could have led up to this responsibility that she feels for getting them home and whatever, in order to lead up to that emotional moment that she has when they're up in the Fallen Sanctum. So yeah, guys, there are a few redeemable things about this episode, but I think it's the worst one we've seen so far. And it's crazy because I had to look it up, but they definitely have different directors for each of these episodes, which is something I still cannot fathom. You think they would have learned from their mistakes going into the sequel trilogy of having different directors for each one. It's going to feel disjointed when you have different visions going into each one. And honestly, I feel like the script, the writing, and the acting, the execution, all of it really suffered in this episode in particular. But I don't know, guys, maybe I'm completely off base. I'd be curious to know what you thought of episode 4 in the comments below. Overall, I have definitely not given up on Skeleton Crew. I still have enjoyed it enough. I definitely want to watch it all the way to the end because I think the overall storyline is there. But guys, do me a favor and subscribe below so you don't miss our next recap and next overview of episode 5. I hope you liked this. If you did, give it a thumbs up and check out one of our other reviews here on screen next. And lastly, I just want to let you know that no matter what you're going through, you are not alone. God is with you and He loves you, and we do too. I'll catch you next time.